The courtroom was silent. The weight of the crimes hung heavy in the air. Pastor Melisiswe Monko, a man entrusted with the spiritual well-being of his flock, stood accused of a heinous act, orchestrating the murder of a church member for insurance money. His wife, Sifosile Pamba, stood beside him, her face pale and drawn. The alleged hitman, Phumlani Kusheka, stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. This was not a scene from a horror film. This was real life. And the truth, as it unfolded, was more shocking than any fiction. This case sent shockwaves through South Africa, shaking the very foundations of trust and faith. The pastor, the wife, the hitman, a trio united by greed and bound by blood, they had preyed on the vulnerable, exploiting their desperation for a better life. But their web of deceit was about to unravel, exposing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their carefully constructed facade. The judge, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and anger, looked at each of the accused in turn. The evidence was overwhelming, the details of the crime chilling. The pastor, once a beacon of hope, was now a symbol of betrayal. His wife, complicit in his schemes, was about to face the consequences of her actions. And the hitman, a cold-blooded killer, would soon learn the price of his brutality. The courtroom held its breath, anticipating the judge's words. Justice was about to be served, but the scars of this betrayal would forever mark the lives of those affected. God's Work International Ministries. The name itself promised sanctuary, a place of solace and support. But for some who crossed its threshold, it became a hunting ground. Pastor Monko, a wolf in sheep's clothing, saw his congregation not as souls to save, but as marks. Opportunities to exploit their faith for his own twisted gain. He targeted the most vulnerable single women struggling financially, desperate for a lifeline. He used his position of authority, his charisma and charm to gain their trust. He offered them false hope, promising them jobs, financial assistance, a better future. All he needed in return was a little information, a signature here, a form filled out there. Little did they know they were signing their lives away. Pastor Monko was collecting the necessary details for life insurance policies where he would be the sole beneficiary. He was playing God, deciding who would live and who would die, all for the promise of a payout. His heart, devoid of compassion, saw only ran signs, not the faces of the people he was condemning to an early grave. His wife, Sifosile, played her part. She was the charming accomplice, the friendly face that disarmed suspicion. She befriended the women, offered them comfort and advice. She was the spider to his flytrap, luring unsuspecting victims into their web of deceit. Together they were a formidable pair, their actions fueled by greed and a callous disregard for human life. The church, meant to be a place of worship and fellowship, had become a den of vipers, where trust was betrayed and lives were treated as commodities. The very people meant to be their shepherd had become their executioner. Hlompho Mohapi, a young woman full of dreams and aspirations, walked through the doors of God's Work International Ministries, her heart filled with hope. She had been struggling to find work, her family depending on her. When Pastor Monko, a pillar of the community, offered her a lifeline, a chance at a better future, she dared to believe. He had painted a picture of a brighter tomorrow, a job at a reputable company, a steady income, the opportunity to provide for her loved ones. All she had to do was attend a job interview, an interview arranged by the pastor himself, a man she trusted implicitly. She dressed in her best clothes, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nerves. This job could change everything, and she was determined to make a good impression. Little did she know, this was no ordinary interview. This was a carefully orchestrated setup, a cruel facade designed to lure her to her death. Pastor Monko had contacted his hitman, Phumlani Kusheka, a man with a heart as cold as ice. A life was nothing but a transaction to Kusheka, a way to make a quick buck. He didn't care about the hopes and dreams of his victims, their families, their futures. He saw the world in shades of grey, his moral compass shattered long ago. Hlompho Mohapi was just another job, another life to extinguish. July 5th, 2018, a date that will forever be etched in the annals of this gruesome case. Hlompho Mohapi, her phone clutched in her hand, sent a series of frantic messages. "I've been kidnapped," she typed, her fingers trembling. Two men. Messages stopped abruptly, leaving behind a chilling silence. Her family, their hearts gripped with fear, contacted the police. Time was of the essence. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity. The police launched a frantic search, following every lead, every whisper, every shred of evidence. Days later, their worst fears were confirmed. Hlompho Mohapi's body was found dumped on the outskirts of town, her life brutally cut short. The initial investigation painted a grim picture. She had been robbed, her belongings scattered, her dignity violated. The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving them reeling in horror. The pastor, his face a mask of grief, offered his condolences to the grieving family. He spoke of God's will, of finding strength in adversity, but behind his facade of sorrow, a sinister truth lurked. He had orchestrated this tragedy, sacrificing an innocent life at the altar of greed. Section 5. Unveiling the depths of deceit, the life insurance scam. As the police delved deeper into Hlompho Mohapi's murder, a sinister pattern began to emerge. The life insurance policy taken out just weeks before her death raised red flags. The beneficiary? None other than Pastor Hlompho Mohapi. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, revealing a shocking picture of greed, deceit, and cold-blooded murder. The investigation uncovered a string of life insurance policies, all taken out on unsuspecting members of the church. The details were chillingly similar. Vulnerable women lured in with promises of a better life, their signatures forged on policies that would ultimately benefit the pastor and his wife. It was a heartless scheme, a betrayal of the highest order. Sifosila Pamba's role in the scam became terrifyingly clear. She had impersonated the women when setting up the policies, using her charm and charisma to allay any suspicions. She was the puppet master, pulling the strings from the shadows, her actions driven by a toxic mix of greed and fear. The investigation revealed that the trio had attempted to cash in on a 3 million rand policy on Hlompho Mohapi shortly after her death. Their greed knew no bounds. They were willing to profit from her death, even as her family mourned her loss. But their haste would prove to be their undoing. The insurance company, alerted by inconsistencies in the policy application, contacted the police. The net was closing in.
The evidence was overwhelming. We had text messages, bank statements, and witness testimonies. It was clear that Pastor Mohapi and his wife had meticulously planned the crime.
Yes, the pieces were finally coming together. The prosecution's case was strong, and the defense was struggling to keep up.
We had to ensure that justice was served, not just for the victim, but for the community that had been betrayed by someone they trusted.
The trial was intense, but the truth was undeniable. The conspiracy was laid bare for all to see. The courtroom was tense as the jury returned with their verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendants, Hlompho Mohapi and Sifosila Pamba, guilty of all charges.
The weight of those words hung in the air. Guilty. The community's faith had been shattered, but justice was being served. With the guilty verdicts in, it was time for sentencing.
Hlompho Mohapi, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment for your role in this heinous crime.
The judge's voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt.
Sifosila Pamba, you are sentenced to 25 years in prison.
This was a significant victory for justice.
The courtroom was silent, the gravity of the sentences sinking in. The community had to come to terms with the betrayal and the loss. Healing would take time, but the strength of the people would see them through. Justice had been served, and now it was time to rebuild and move forward.